Okay. Right. Cool. Hello, everyone. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. Today we're doing a kimchi fried rice that I've been doing for quite a while now. That I like doing on a cast iron pan because you can get a super crispy bottom bit or burnt end to the fried rice, so you get a nice crispy fried rice, which I love doing. So I'm actually going to put my wok aside for, I think, this entire thing. I'm not actually going to use my wok for this whole fried rice, which might be the first time I've done that in a while. I've been using my wok quite a bit lately. So we're going to do this whole fried rice in a cast iron pan, and I'm going to show you how I like to approach that, a few of the things that I like to do in a cast iron pan, what makes them so good for a cast iron pan, and why a cast iron pan is so important for something like this. So if you have any questions for me, feel free to drop your questions in the comments. I don't know everything about fried rice, but I know lots of stuff, so hopefully I can be helpful or informative, or at the very least entertaining to watch. So let's dive into it. So as with most of our recipes that I've been doing, I should also say, as with all of the other things that I cook on these live streams, this fried rice has a recipe video that goes along with it. The recipe video lives over on my YouTube channel. So if you're watching on YouTube or Reddit, that would be the YouTube channel at the bottom of the screen, which is youtube.com/woocancook. If you're watching on YouTube, it's the channel you're already on. So some folks already are over there. But as with most of the things that I cook, almost everything that I cook, in fact, on live stream, there's a recipe video that goes with it, and those recipe videos, they usually move a little bit slower, kind of talk my way through some of the decision making that goes through some of the things that I do in a recipe, why I include certain things, why I leave some stuff out, things like that. And this recipe, I believe, was a part of a series that I've been doing a whole bunch of fried rice recipes. So there's a couple of fried rice recipes that are over on my YouTube channel. So if you're interested in stuff like that, I recommend hopping over to YouTube and checking that out. So as with pretty much all of my recipes, or at least all of my savory recipes, I'm starting off by crushing and mincing some garlic, followed by some finely minced ginger. So these happen to be the two baseline ingredients that we add to pretty much every savory Chinese recipe, at least. Most Chinese recipes, I would say almost all of the like pan Asian things that I cook that fall under like savory generally have garlic and ginger in them. And that's because they work very well as the two fundamental starting layers of umami. So if we're trying to build out layers of umami, this is always a good starting point. So it's not necessarily because we want everything to taste like garlic and ginger, but more because we're going to start building on top of these two things, which is why if you've ever been to your like Asian friend's house, and you'll notice that they have huge quantities of garlic and ginger in their pantry. That's because in Chinese cooking, it goes in pretty much everything, because it's the starting point for most of the things that come out of Chinese cuisine. So that was my garlic. I gave it a good crush, and then I didn't really do much of a mince on it, actually. I pretty much just sliced it up. And that's because once you crush garlic, it pretty much just starts falling apart after that. So we give it a good whack with the flat of our knife, and then after that you can pretty much just give it a quick slice, and then everything kind of comes apart. With ginger, however, you do need to be a little bit more particular, because ginger is not quite as delicate as garlic, which means that we have to be a little bit more thorough. So the first thing that we do with ginger is give it a peel, so especially if your ginger is pretty old like mine. So I gave it a good peel with the back of a spoon, or like the flat side of a spoon, and that skin will come right off. And then after that, we're going to start by doing a rough dice on our ginger, which starts by a couple slices down the center, one down the middle, and then go straight down. And then once you have your dice, then we're going to go for our mince, which is really just about running your knife through it as persistently as you can. Right, and that is our ginger. So those are going to be the very first two things that we throw into our wok well, not our wok today, actually, into our pan. And we're going to bloom them out. We call those our aromatic elements. And we call them aromatics because, for the specific reason, for the obvious reason, I guess, is because they're aromatic. They smell. They're pungent. We're going to throw them in very, very first. And then we're going to bloom out all of their aromatic qualities, meaning that if you throw them in too late, so if you throw in garlic and ginger towards the end, what happens is if they don't come into contact with that hot oil while the pan is still empty, then you're not going to be able to bloom out all of those aromatic qualities. So they have to come into contact with that oil in order to bloom out all of those pungent qualities. So very frequently, I have actually tested this and seen what happens. But if you forget and you throw in your garlic too late, then you really don't get much flavor out of it. It pretty much just kind of blends into the whole stir fry, which is not what you want. So anytime that you're using garlic and ginger, I would recommend throwing that stuff in very, very first. Okay, so next up, what I'm doing is chopping up some green onions, but as you may have noticed, I separated them. So this is the whites of our green onions, which is really just the bottom half of our green onions. The reason we're separating these is because the two different halves of green onions have two very different qualities about them. So the whites of a green onion are a lot more durable and can withstand aggressive heat. So we could take a quick look. You have your green onion, so the whites portion would be this more durable portion, so you'll notice it's a lot thicker and just generally a lot more sturdy. And the green portion, which would be this side, is a lot more leafy and not quite as durable as the white portion. So if we treated them the same and used them in the same purpose in a wok fry, they would behave or fry up very, very differently because of their physical properties are very, very different. So what I've gotten in the habit of doing, I don't do this with every recipe, but I do it pretty much any time that it calls for a recipe that needs a garnish, is I have separated them. So we slice up the whites into relatively large slices, and those are going to go in with our aromatic elements. So we're going to throw those in with our garlic and ginger because the whites of a green onion are a lot more durable and can withstand that really severe heat in the pan, whereas the greens would not. So if we had thrown the greens in with our aromatics, they would probably just disintegrate and kind of come apart and not really contribute very much. But in this case, so we're separating these, and then we're going to throw these in as a garnish towards the very, very end. So this is going to be the very last thing that we throw on top of our stir fry. So this is going to be the very, very last thing that we throw on top of our fried rice. So they're going to be our garnish. So they're not actually going to hit any wok heat at all or pan heat at all. And that's because they're really, really delicate. So we don't want them to have any heat. Not Roger, great username. I wonder if you are Roger. Hello. Hello to everyone just joining. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. Today we're doing a crispy kimchi fried rice that I'm going to be doing in a cast iron pan. So over on the stove, I have my cast iron pan, and it is actually not heating up, and I'm going to explain in a minute why it's not heating up. And I love doing this kimchi fried rice in a cast iron pan, specifically not using my wok today. And that's because in a cast iron pans have a lot more heat retention than a wok does. So while a wok does get very, very hot, it has this property about it in which if you put too many things into a cast iron pan or into a wok, it will eventually start losing heat. So if you are doing something, say like a fried rice, for example, as that wok starts filling up and as more things enter that wok, you're gradually going to start losing heat over time. So it can work. There are certainly ways to do a fried rice in a cast iron or in a wok, and I have actually done a number of fried rices on these streams where I do them in a wok, and we kind of walk through some of the things, no pun intended, that you need to do in order to do a fried rice in a wok on a home range. Specifically, how to do something like a fried rice where there's a really large amount of ingredients that are going to go into the wok, and how to do that in a home range where you don't have the same kind of extremely high heat that you would have in a restaurant. So, but today the recipe that we're doing is for a crispy kimchi fried rice, which we're specifically using a cast iron pan because we're going to leave it at the bottom, or we're going to leave it at the very, very end of our cook, and sear the bottom on our cast iron pan, and then we're going to get this really, really nice crispy bottom to it, which is going to be created by the high heat retention of a cast iron pan. So you can't do that in a wok because, oh man, I lost another camera. You can't do that in a wok because in a wok you won't have enough heat retention. So if you tried to do that in a wok, it would probably just burn. But in a cast iron pan, you have so much heat retention that the whole thing will just like build up a whole bunch of heat, and then what happens is you end up searing the bottom of the rice. So kind of similar to how you would do a pan-seared steak, for example. So the same process is happening in a pan-seared steak, except we're going to do it with rice. And we're going to have a nice crispy fried rice. Oops. Hold on. Bring it back. There it is. Sorry about that. I turned the wrong camera off. Anyway, you 3 times already. So yeah, I love using a bit of gochujang, which is what Lazy Chill just mentioned. We're going to use a bit of gochujang, which is going to be super, super tasty. I love using gochujang in kimchi fried rice because it gives it a nice bit of extra punch to it that you wouldn't really be able to get without a huge amount of kimchi brine, which I'm going to actually try and do today, but I don't know if we're going to be able to get it because I actually used my kimchi brine up for another recipe earlier today, so we're going to give it a shot though. Sorry, rebooting some cameras here. So you got the cast iron now. Oh, cool. Hello, Kevin. Hello to everyone just joining. I guess I should introduce myself again. My name is Wesley. This is Wu Can Cook. Hello to everyone just joining. Today we're doing a crispy kimchi fried rice that we're going to be doing in a cast iron pan. I know at least one person on Reddit has already done this, Lazy Chills. I just mentioned that they already did it. Kevin is watching over on YouTube and has a cast iron pan and is ready to do this, which I'm super stoked for. So, because I love cooking with other people. Cooking with other people is always more fun because then you can just not freak out as much about your mistakes, because if you make your mistake and you're cooking by yourself, then you just kind of have to live with your mistakes. But if you make mistakes and you're cooking with other people, then you can talk about it. So yeah, cool. All right, so right now, oh yeah, so introducing myself. Sorry, I'm getting distracted. Today we're doing a crispy kimchi fried rice that I'm going to be doing in a cast iron pan. The cast iron pan is super important to this particular recipe. It's because that's how we're going to get the crispiness of it. So we're going to do a cast iron sear, similar to the way that you would do sear in a cast iron pan on steak, for example. Yes, so Handsome Habanero. I love reading the usernames on these things. Handsome Habanero, yes, the recipes are found on YouTube, so all of the everything that I cook on livestream has a recipe video that goes along with it. Those recipe videos, they always live over on YouTube, so you can, if you're watching on Reddit, that would be the YouTube channel at the bottom of the screen, which is youtube.com/WooCanCook. That recipe video, I think I forgot to put it up on the profile, but it is definitely on the channel. You might have to dig. It's a couple months old, so but if you dig far back enough, you'll eventually find it. And there's a concurrent live stream happening right now, so that would be the laptop behind me, and that's what that laptop behind me is doing. So if you were watching on YouTube, you would have already known that we were going to be doing this kimchi fried rice. Because the YouTube live stream is where I announce everything in advance. So I think I announced this maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. So if you were following on YouTube, you would have known 3 weeks ago that I would be cooking this. So in addition to all of the recipe videos, that's also where the whole schedule of everything that I'm going to live stream lives. But that's also where all the recipe videos live. Those recipe videos, they usually move a little bit slower and kind of talk through some of the decision making that goes into my my recipes and why I do the certain things that I do in recipes, stuff like that. So we have a couple series that are in progress on the YouTube channel. So there's a whole series that's dedicated to Chinese American food that I've been doing, which has been super, super fun. I've done a couple of Panda Express recipes. There's a new P.F. Chang's recipe coming up tomorrow. And the whole point of that series is kind of like taking apart Chinese American food and taking a look at like what makes Chinese American food so American, and like what are those American qualities that are going into Chinese American food. and seeing what it looks like if we take out all of those American elements. So lots of times when I reproduce Chinese American food, what I find myself doing is adding lots of sugar and adding lots of sauce, because like those are the things that Americans love about Chinese food, is that it's like either very sweet or really, really savory. Americans love umami, but they don't like subtle umami. They love like everything umami. So lots of times when I do Chinese American foods, I find myself like dialing all those things up to 11. So usually in those Chinese American hacks, I'll do a second version, and in that second version I will take it apart, remove all those American ingredients, and then redo it with a more authentic, like Chinese approach to putting together something like that. So those recipes, those are all over on YouTube. So if you're interested in stuff like that and reproducing some of the things that I cook, definitely hop over to YouTube and check some of that stuff out. Oh, I convinced you to get a cast iron pan. Yeah, definitely get a cast iron pan. Amazing mood. Yeah, totally. So oh yeah, that's the last thing I'll mention before I finish putting together this sauce, is we're working our way to a 1,500 subscriber goal by the end of January. We're super close, actually. I think we're like maybe 30 subs away from that. So if you want to help us hit that goal, hop over to YouTube and give that a subscribe. But only if you're interested. Don't subscribe if you're not interested. I hate when people do that, because then I don't want to spam you. So only subscribe if you're interested. And yeah, so a couple folks already watching over on YouTube. I see a couple folks have their cast iron pans out and are ready to go. So before we move over to the stove, though, we're going to finish putting together all of our mise en place. So this we're doing right now is our sauce. So this is 2 tablespoons of gochujang and 4 tablespoons of soy sauce. And then last up, this is 2 tablespoons of sesame oil. So if you'll notice, and if you've done these recipes before, you'll notice that this is probably one of the simplest sauces that I put together. And that's because gochujang has a whole bunch of stuff going on already. And really, if you're using gochujang, you really don't need to add very much else. Gochujang is very, very pungent, so don't overdo it on gochujang. That stuff does a lot already. But the last thing I'm going to try and do is squeeze out as much kimchi brine as you can. I've used all the way up to a 1/4 cup of kimchi brine in this recipe. But depending on how old your kimchi is, you may or may not be able to use kimchi brine here, because it only really yields as the kimchi gets older. So as the kimchi gets older, that cabbage starts giving off more liquid, and as that liquid comes out, then you have more brine. As it so happens, I just did a gochujang fried chicken last weekend, and I used the brine for that. So I'm not expecting to get a whole lot of brine out of this, but we'll try. It's actually quite a bit. That's probably about it, though. But if you have a lot of brine in your kimchi, or if you have a very, very old kimchi, squeeze it out and get as much as you can out. Yeah, cast iron is super fun to cook on. My cast iron pan, I only use 3 different pans in my entire kitchen, and I have a couple of like small skillets that I still get out from time to time. But really the only 3 pans that I use are my wok, my cast iron pan, and then my Dutch oven. Those are really the only 3 pans that I use in my entire kitchen. And the Dutch oven is technically not a pan even. So yeah, if you have a good cast iron pan, it will pretty much serve for pretty much everything that you can do. I use it for breakfast. I use it for sautés all the time. I use it for pastas all the time. Actually, I use the Dutch oven for pastas more, but. Have I tried making my own kimchi? Yeah, a couple folks have asked that. I bought everything that I need to make it. I just haven't gotten around to doing it. So I tracked down some gochugaru, which was the thing that I've been missing most of this time. And I tracked that down. That was back in like October or something. And then I just didn't get around to doing it. I also tracked down some Napa cabbage, and I was like ready to do it, and I just ran out of time, and the cabbage went bad. So. But it is on my to-do list. I have everything that I need to do it, because I found the gochugaru, and for a while it was the reason that I wasn't doing it is because I couldn't find gochugaru, which is like an absolute requirement. Okay, so very last thing that we're going to do, and there's a reason why it's the very last thing that we're doing, is slicing up some bacon. If you're doing a recipe like this where there are meats and veggies involved, the first thing that you want to do, is if you have garnishes, so like this is our garnish today, is the greens of our green onion, make sure that they're very, very far away from your raw meats. So I'm going to put this on the opposite side of the kitchen, and we're very specifically doing that because those garnishes are not actually going to get cooked at all, which means that if there's cross-contamination between those 2 things, there won't really be an opportunity to kill off any bacteria in like wok heat or pan heat. You'll notice that there are still things that are next to my cutting board right now. So there's the whites of my green onions, there's garlic and ginger next to that. All of those things, those are actually going to eventually end up in our pan. So because of that, I'm not super worried about cross-contaminating there because eventually it's all going to get cooked anyway. So all of that bacteria is eventually going to get cooked off. But if there are elements that are not going to be cooked, like our garnishes, for example, we want to be sure to put that on the opposite side of the kitchen so that we don't cross-contaminate and make ourselves sick. It is also the reason why I'm cutting my bacon very, very last, because now we don't have to clean our cutting board until much later, or until it's time to clean up. Or I might give it a good quick wash, but we don't have to clean our cutting board in between chopping stuff. So yeah, so save yourself some trouble and do it. Keep your order of operations together. Do the meats last. Okay, so that's our bacon, and I think we're ready to head over to the stove. Alright, so over on the stove I have my cast iron pan. You'll notice that it has no heat in it actually. So there's no heat on my pan at all, which is very unusual. And really the only time that I ever do this is when I'm rendering bacon fat. So if you've followed these recipes before, you'll notice that might be the only time that I ever don't preheat a pan is when I'm doing bacon fat. So the reason that our pan is cold is because when you add bacon to a cold pan, what happens is all of that hardened and solidified bacon fat, so all of the white part of your bacon, is going to render into a liquid form. And what happens when that liquid form renders is that we can use it as our cooking oil. So we're actually, there's not a whole lot of fat, but there's quite a bit of fat, so I might actually bolster that with a little bit of vegetable oil, but for the most part, we're going to be using that bacon fat to cook it, and it's going to be super, super delicious. And it is also the reason why I use bacon, probably most predominantly, the main reason why I use bacon is because it has a lot of good cooking qualities, so we can use it to cook stuff in. Yeah, so I'm turning my cast iron pan on. Cast iron pan, as it so happens, takes quite a while to heat up. It will probably take at least 5 minutes to heat up. So over the course of the next 5 minutes, this pan is going to go from ice cold to ripping hot. And over the course of that time, all of that bacon fat is going to start rendering out. That process, it does absolutely have to happen very, very slowly. If we were to do it in a wok, which I have sometimes done, in a wok heats up much faster. So if we brought that temperature all the way up really, really quickly, what would happen is the same thing that would happen if we introduced bacon to a hot pan, in which that process would essentially just burn the bacon. So we would get burnt bacon fat, which is not what we're after. So we're trying to render out all of that bacon fat into a liquid form by doing that really, really slowly. Am I touching everything? No, I washed my hands. The sink is off camera. I also just cleaned the cutting board too. But yeah, that's totally a good point. But like, really, the only thing that I worry about when I'm thinking about cross-contamination is, am I cross-contaminating with anything that is, number one, is something that I'm going to eat, and number two is something that's not going to get cooked. So in this case, really the only thing that I'm super worried about are the greens of my green onions. But yes, definitely, if you want to be super careful, clean everything. So I did clean the cutting board. Our cutting board is clean. And that's really just because I like to clean while I cook, so there's less cleanup to do towards when we're done cooking. Those moccasins look hella comfy. Yeah, they are. I'm super stoked about these moccasins. So a couple of weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago now, actually, I was making chocolate-covered strawberries, I think. I was making something. I'm pretty sure it was chocolate-covered strawberries. And I wasn't wearing the moccasins. These moccasins, all of my house slippers have grips on them. And I just totally ate shit. I think I slipped on a puddle of water and just like face down into the countertop. And that was the last time that I have ever been barefoot in the kitchen. So I learned the hard way. Always have some kind of footwear on, because slipping hazards in kitchen is a real thing. Be really careful. Salt and chili beef. Ooh, I would definitely do that. I'll add it to the list. Thank you for the recommendations. That reminds me of the other thing. Is if you have any requests, feel free to drop your requests in the comments. I have a running list of a lot of things that I've been working on. So one of the things coming up is a Korean fried chicken. It's actually the Korean fried chicken from Shake Shack, which essentially I used the Shake Shack recipe as an opportunity to just make some Korean fried chicken. So that was a request that folks have been asking for a little while. So yeah, if you have any requests, feel free to drop them in the comments. Salt and chili beef, I will definitely do that. I haven't had shrimp in a while. Maybe I'll try shrimp too. The other thing that I'm working on right now is a Mongolian beef, which is coming up soon. I thought it would be done earlier, but the last time that I tried making it 2 different ways and I messed it up both times. I'm really annoyed that I messed up Mongolian beef because it's supposed to be a really simple stir fry, but I messed it up because it has a cornstarch coating and I messed up the cornstarch. So if you did make a request and it's taken me a really long time to do it, it's also possible that I did it and I messed it up. So there are definitely a number of things that I have messed up and had to do 3 or 4 times. The recipe that's coming up this Friday is for a mushu pork from PF Chang's, and I had to do it I think at least 4 or 5 times because I messed it up so many times. I did not realize what really frustrates me is when I mess up a recipe that's supposed to be really, really simple, like a mushu pork or a Mongolian beef. At least I learned, I guess, that's true. Alright, so our bacon is slowly coming up to temperature. You'll notice that all of this bacon is starting to render out a very liquidy bacon fat. So I guess I would give this another 2 or 3 minutes, and then we're going to have huge pools of bacon fat pulling up at the bottom of our pan, and that's going to be super, super useful to cook in. Cool. Yeah, I'm gonna give that a couple more minutes while that's going. Cringe guitar, yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah. So you tried to make Mongolian beef and it turned out too salty. Yeah. So like the real thing that caught me up on Mongolian beef is that it's not just a simple beef stir fry. I didn't actually realize this, but Mongolian beef is coated in cornstarch, and that's how you get like a really crispy cornstarch or like crispy edges to that beef. And I did not realize this either. So I did the cornstarch bread like coating. It's not a breading because it's not deep fried. It's just a coating. And then what happens is you flash cook that with that coating, and supposedly it will do 2 different things. The number 1 thing is that it creates a nice crispy edge to the beef, but the number 2 thing that happens is it protects the beef against the high like aggressive heat from the wok, so it creates a really, really nice like tender beef. The problem is if you don't sear it properly, that cornstarch will come off, and then it will just add to your sauce. And what happens is if you add all of that cornstarch to your sauce, you're going to get a very, very gloopy, clumped up cornstarch sauce, which is not what you're after. So I tried it, and I didn't sear it properly, and my cornstarch, all of the cornstarch came off of the coating from my beef. And what happened is they just all came off into the sauce, and then my sauce would have been the equivalent of adding like a 1/4 cup of cornstarch to like our sauce base, and then it just turned into like this huge gelatinous cornstarch mess, which was super frustrating because I did it twice and it happened both times, and it must have been like $30 worth of Angus steak. So I was really frustrated. The second time it came out a little better, but I'm pretty confident that the next time I try it, it's gonna work. All right, so our bacon is pretty much there. I'm gonna let this go for maybe another couple of seconds. But as you can see, there's plenty of bacon fat pulling up at the bottom of our pan here. So all of this bacon fat, that's what we're going to be using to cook in. So super, super useful as a cooking element. So. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to pull out the solids here. So we want to make sure that we get as much of these solid elements of our bacon out of the pan. So we don't want this to stay in the pan because what will happen is it will eventually just start burning because the bacon will eventually overcook, which is not what we're after. Really what we want is just this liquefied bacon fat, and I wish there was a little bit more, but I think it will be okay. So we're going to pull out our bacon solids, and then we're going to add that back to the pan towards the very, very end. And this is going to be the last thing that we add back to our pan here. I stream often, yeah, actually. So if this is your first time catching this stream, I stream every Tuesday and Thursday at 6:30 p.m. PST, Wednesdays at 6 p.m. PST, and new recipes coming out every Friday. Occasionally I'll do a weekend stream, but mostly Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays are when I'm streaming. So Tuesdays, Thursdays, 6:30, Wednesdays, 6 p.m. PST, and then every Friday, new recipes coming out. So tomorrow we have a brand new recipe coming out for the Mongolian beef from, not the Mongolian beef, the Wushu pork from PF Chang's that's going to come out. And that's going to be adding to our series on Chinese American foods. So, if you haven't caught this channel before, hello to everyone just joining. My name is Wesley. This is Wu Can Cook. Today we're doing a crispy kimchi fried rice that I'm going to be doing in a cast iron pan. We just finished rendering out all of our bacon fat here. If you're interested in reproducing these things yourself, I recommend hopping over to the YouTube channel, which would be, if you're watching on Reddit, the YouTube channel at the bottom of the screen. There's definitely a number of folks who are watching on YouTube. I believe a couple folks who are cooking along with me. So, in addition to all of the recipe videos, that's also where I post the whole schedule of everything that I'm going to be cooking. So, if you were following over on YouTube, you would have known a couple of weeks ago that we were going to be doing this particular recipe today. And if you're really committed, which I think a couple of folks did this, is you can go out and pick up the ingredients for what we're going to be cooking, and you can cook along with me. So that's super fun. So if you're interested in stuff like that, I recommend hopping over to YouTube, checking out some of that stuff. We have new recipes coming out every Friday. There's a whole series dedicated to reproducing Chinese American foods. There's another series that's dedicated to reproducing foods from local restaurants here in the San Francisco Bay Area. A lot of those are inspired by, actually just a lot of the recipes in general are inspired by things from my childhood, so stuff that my mom or my dad used to cook for me, or just generally things that I've been eating since I was a little kid. So a lot of them are like kind of stuff that like pretty much most Chinese kids have probably eaten it, but most folks who are not Chinese have probably not had this stuff. So I just finished doing a recipe for tea eggs, which probably most Chinese people know what that is. They're brown eggs, but probably a lot of folks who are not Chinese have never heard of what a tea egg is. So lots of stuff like that are coming up over on the YouTube channel. So if you're interested in stuff like that, hop over to the YouTube and check it out. We're working our way to 1,500 subscribers on YouTube by the end of the month. So if you want to help us hit that goal, hop over and check it out. We're pretty close. I think we're like probably maybe 30 subs away. So. Yeah, cooking along sounds interesting. Definitely, yeah, let me know if you're going to cook along with me. That's going to be super fun. Chef Hero Terada. AP Chef. No, I don't. Sorry, I don't know who either of those folks are. I do watch a lot of like cooking TV though, or like a lot of cooking on YouTube. I watch a lot of Kenji Lopez, a lot of Binging with Babish, stuff like that. Chinese Cooking Demystified, I love that series. That series is really, their channel is super intimidating because they're doing a whole bunch of stuff that you would only be able to do if you could get like a lot of like the real deal, crazy, hard to find stuff that you probably, a lot of that stuff you can't find in America. Those guys are definitely in mainland China. So I love that channel though. Chinese Cooking Demystified, if you haven't checked that out, their channel is really cool. All right, so let's hop over to the stove. I added a couple of tablespoons of vegetable oil here because we didn't have quite enough bacon fat, but I think that will be okay. So we're going to start with our aromatics. So this is my ginger, followed by my garlic. And lastly is the whites of my green onions. And then I'm going to bloom these out for just long enough until they become fragrant. So we're looking for maybe 10 seconds, but at this point, you really just want to use your nose. Smell it. What does it smell like? When you start smelling garlic and ginger, you know you're about done. All right, next up, I'm adding my rice. So this is day-old rice, so very important. Don't use fresh rice when you're doing a fried rice, because fresh rice has the quality about it that we love about fresh rice, is that it's super fluffy and super moist. But if you're doing fried rice in which it's going into a pan, those qualities about rice are not going to be very good in a pan because it's going to end up being a mushy rice. So if you only have fresh rice, put a pot of rice on in the morning or maybe in the afternoon, And this is a pot of rice that I had done. This is from yesterday, so it is day old. And I left it out overnight, I think. And that's just really going to dry out all of the moisture from the rice, so we don't have a soggy rice in our pan. Right now I'm just looking to break apart all of these solids, so I don't want clumps of rice here. I'm just trying to break out all of these large clumps. Yeah, that's looking good. And then next up I'm going to throw in my kimchi. So how much kimchi are we using? Half a cup. Alright, so half a cup of kimchi going in. I might actually use a little bit more than that. Yeah, that'll do it. Alright, so that's half a cup of kimchi that's going in. Whoops. And then I'm just giving this a toss to make sure everything is combined. And then I'm adding my sauce next. Actually, let's add our bacon back. Before I do that, I'm adding my bacon solids back. All right, now we're adding our sauce. And when I use these sauces, what I usually like to do is reserve the last couple of tablespoons of sauce. So I'm going to reserve, maybe that's like 2 tablespoons of sauce here. The reason that I like to reserve that is to make sure that we don't over season. So if you do need it, toss everything to combine and then taste. And then if you do need it, you can add it. But what I like to do is hold back that last couple of tablespoons just to make sure that we're not over seasoning and that everything isn't too salty. Yeah, and it does need it, so I'm going to add the rest of this here. Alright, so while that's going, I'm going to do a couple more things that we need to finish off this recipe. So I'm going to take this cast iron pan and actually going to set it on my side burner here, which is off camera. But we're going to let this go for another couple of minutes. We probably should heat this wok up first. And while that's going, what we're going to do is fry up a couple of fried eggs. So if you've ever had like Korean street food, really, or just like Asian street food in general, I guess, the thing that like ties everything together is a fried egg. So that comes up a lot in street food, is they just put fried egg on everything. Definitely in like Taiwanese street food, for sure in Korean food. In Korean street food, it's just a fried egg on top of everything. And that just like tops everything off. Ramen, fried egg in a ramen, fried egg in fried rice, fried egg in Thai food all the time, fried egg in Thai street food all the time. Just everything, finish it with a fried egg, especially in sunny side up fried egg. Asians love that shit. We love that stuff. So what we're going to do 2 things. Right now, first thing I'm going to do is heat up my wok so that we can fry an egg in it. And the second thing that we're doing right now is we're going to leave our cast iron pan, I should turn on timer on, for a full 3 minutes. So for the next 3 minutes, our pan is going to be on high heat, and we're not going to touch it, which is going to be very, very aggravating, because over the next three minutes, you're going to start thinking about whether or not that fried rice is burning, which essentially, technically, it is. It is technically burning, but that burning, is what that sear element is. So what's happening is the bottom element of our fried rice, if you have done everything correctly. So you have to have followed all of the first steps to go through first. So we do have to have enough bacon fat. If you don't have enough bacon fat, there has to be enough oil. If you don't have enough of those two things in your pan, it won't work. And the third thing that has to happen is you do have to have high heat and high heat retention. So enough oil, enough bacon fat. You have to have a pan that has high heat retention. So today we're using a cast iron pan. You could also use stainless steel probably, and it would work okay. Don't do this in a wok because it won't sear. It will just burn. But if you do all of those things and you leave it on the stove for the next another 2 minutes, what will happen is that pan is going to start searing the bottom of the rice the same way that you would sear a steak or like a ribeye steak, stuff like that. It's going to develop a nice sear, and then when we start agitating the rice after 3 minutes, we're going to have nice crispy bits of rice that have developed over the course of the last 3 minutes in which they have seared. Super agitating, super scary, because you're going to start thinking about whether or not you're burning the rice. And it's kind of going to start smelling like it might be burning. But I promise you, don't touch it for another minute and a half and it won't burn. Fern Tree 50, how often do I cook live? So I live stream every Tuesday and Thursday at 6:30 p.m. PST, Wednesdays at 6 p.m. PST, and occasionally I live stream on Friday weekends, but not as consistently. But definitely Tuesdays and Thursdays 6:30, Wednesdays at 6 p.m. And there's a whole schedule of everything that I'm going to be when and at what I'm going to be live streaming over on YouTube. So if you hop over to the YouTube channel, which if you're watching on Reddit is the YouTube channel at the bottom of the screen, that's where all of the whole schedule of everything that I'm going to be cooking. So I think for the next 2.5 weeks, everything is already posted. In addition to that, every Friday there's a new recipe. So there's a recipe for a mushu pork from P.F. Chang's coming out tomorrow. We also did my mom's hecai daimo, which is kind of like a little bit more of an authentic approach to mushu pork. And all of that's coming up on Fridays. So usually what will happen is if the recipe that comes out on Friday is something that I can eat for dinner, which the mushu pork is, probably the following Tuesday we'll cook that recipe. So this Friday, so tomorrow, mushu pork is coming out, and next Tuesday, we're going to be making mushu pork. So we're going to be cooking through the recipe that I released on Friday. All right, so we're about 10 seconds away. So I'm going to start checking. Yeah, and stuff has definitely started to stick. So we have this nice crispy layer of rice that has developed, and I'm going to move it, and we're going to look. Yeah, and it worked. Definitely say a little prayer before you agitate, but as you might notice, we have these nice crispy edges to our fried rice here, and all of that is going to be really, really essential to getting what we're calling crispy fried rice. So. All right, so I'm going to agitate once, and then I'm actually going to let it sit for another couple of minutes because there's a little bit more moisture than I'd like, and then we're pretty much done. David, what whiskey am I drinking tonight? Today we're drinking Sagamore, so Sagamore Rye, which I've been drinking a lot of lately. It's a really tasty one. I love actually drinking Sagamore. I don't drink a lot of things on the rocks. I pretty much only drink whiskey, most of the time when I'm drinking scotch, I don't drink things on the rocks. But Sagamore Rye, I actually have been in the habit of drinking it on the rocks. Can tofu be made to feel and taste like meat? I'm of the opinion that you can't make tofu. Everyone needs to stop making tofu taste like meat. Tofu is really a really useful thing to throw in to stir fries, which is why in Chinese food there's tofu in so many different things. But the reason that everyone thinks that it's bland and tasteless is because everyone keeps trying to make tofu taste like meat, which it's not. It's very different from meat. But if you treat it differently, so usually in Chinese recipes what we do, very often, there's a couple of different ways that we use tofu, but most frequently what I like to do is use the tofu and we'll throw it in at the very, very end of a stir fry, and that will be the last protein that we introduce, and that's because tofu is really delicate. So we throw it in at the very, very end. We don't worry about whether or not we're imparting flavor to the tofu because you're never going to make tofu taste like something unless you deep fry it. That's the one exception that I can think about is deep fry tofu, and then it will taste like something. But otherwise, it's never going to taste like anything. Just throw it in late, and then it will have a nice texture, and it's a really nice protein to add at the very, very end. All right, yeah, so this is looking good. I'm going to set this aside and switch my burners here. So I'm setting my cast iron aside. I'm also killing the heat there. So our cast iron is just going to start chilling. And we're going to fry some eggs. Right, so real quick, I ended up using the wok anyway. But this is a couple tablespoons of oil, vegetable oil. And we're going to do, in Chinese cooking, we call this a long yao, which is coating a very hot oil, or very hot wok in very cold oil. And that's how we get a non-stick surface. And then we're introducing our eggs. Let's fry some eggs. Alright, so I love wok frying eggs because you can get really, really high heat, and it happens. The whole thing comes together really, really quickly. Which means don't walk away from the pan at this point because everything is going to start coming together really, really quickly. So. Is it copper? No, my wok is made of carbon steel. Although I wish I had a copper wok. Copper has really, really high heat retention. So copper wok is really great, but copper woks are also really expensive too. This is good to use. All right. So I'm going for a sunny side up egg here, and I'm going to do that by tossing my wok a little bit so it's sticking a little bit more than I'd like to, and then I bet it'll be okay. And then we're going to do this 4 times. Oh no, we're running out of time. Yeah, I guess we are running out of time. If I run out of time, thank you everyone on Reddit for tuning in. If I do run out of time, we're also streaming on YouTube too, so we could hop over there. I might try and restart it, but it kind of depends on how much time we have left. For those just joining, my name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. Today we did a crispy kimchi fried rice, which if you've been following along, we did it in a cast iron pan. So for the first time in a while, I did not take my wok out until the very, very end here actually. So if this is your first time catching one of these streams, everything that I cook on stream has a recipe video that goes along with it. Those recipe videos, they live over on my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/WooCanCook. So if you're interested in reproducing what we're cooking today, or just generally anytime you see me cooking something, check out the recipe video that's over on YouTube. Those recipes, they generally move a little bit slower. Sometimes I'll talk through a lot of the decision making that goes behind what I'm cooking, why I add certain things, why I don't add some things, stuff like that. Lots of that kind of like decision making and conversation will come up in the recipe videos for sure. So if you're interested in cooking stuff yourself, definitely hop over to YouTube and check out some of those recipe videos. In addition to the recipe videos, that's also where the schedule of everything that I live stream lives. So you can check out what we're going to be cooking in the next couple of weeks. If you are following on YouTube, so a couple folks are following over on YouTube and following along. So those folks already knew a couple of weeks ago that I'd be doing this fried rice. And some of them, I believe, picked up some ingredients in this are cooking it along with me. I saw someone a couple folks went out and bought a cast iron just for this one, so that's pretty cool. Yeah. So yeah, if you're interested in stuff like that, definitely hop over to YouTube and check some of that stuff out. We have a whole series going on right now that's dedicated to just fried rice. This recipe was dedicated. I think one of the last things most recent things that I did in our fried rice series. So there's that whole series going on. Oop, that was broken egg. I guess we have a over easy egg now. So there's a whole series dedicated to fried rice. There's another series that's dedicated to just Chinese American food. So this tomorrow there's a recipe coming out from the mushu pork from PF Chang's that's coming up tomorrow. There's a whole series dedicated to just Chinese American food in which I have been deconstructing Chinese American food, taking a look at like what makes Chinese American food so American and why like what are the American qualities of Chinese American food, and like sort of why they are the way that they are. And then sort of like deconstructing some of those things and seeing what happens if we remove those American elements and then replace them with like more traditional Chinese elements and seeing what that kind of looks like. So that series has been super fun, is sort of like deconstructing Chinese American food and then reconstructing it as if it were traditional Chinese foods. What oil do I use to season the pan? Yeah, so the oil that I've been using lately has just been grapeseed oil, which I love. But you could really use anything that's neutral. So grapeseed, vegetable, canola oil will work. Any of those will be fine as long as it's neutral. So really the only thing you probably don't want to use are things like peanut oil or olive oil, both of which are definitely biased, so it will make your pan taste like something. You can definitely season a wok with peanut oil, but probably don't want to season a cast iron pan with peanut oil. Oh yeah, cool. Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Yeah. Thank you all for the gifts and extending the stream. We're probably like maybe 5 minutes away, so if we could gather up enough stream time, we can avoid restarting. So, but yeah, definitely hop over to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. Check that channel out, and help us we're working our way to 1,500 subscribers by the end of the month. So if you want to help us hit that goal, hop over, check it out, and give it a subscribe. All right, I think that ought to do it. Cool, so that's it for our fried eggs. Super important. The last thing that we want to do anytime that we use a wok is clean the wok while it's still hot. Very, very important for wok care. And if you've watched these streams before, you'll know that I say this at the end of pretty much every stream now, is when you use a wok, same thing is going to be true for your cast iron pans, but not quite as important, is clean it after you're done. And that's because while the wok is hot, it has a very nice non-stick surface, meaning that while it's hot, you can rinse everything off. So you'll notice that everything that had built up on my wok, so all that like egg that was sticking, all of that stuff, it just came right off when I rinsed it. So if I had waited to eat, say for example, we sat down and ate this fried rice and then tried to clean our wok, all of that stuff would have stuck to the wok, and then we would have to do things like scrub the wok. We would have to get sponges out. Maybe you might have to use like steel wool, stuff like that. All of those are things that you don't want to be doing in a carbon steel wok for sure. Cool. You know what you're making for dinner? Yeah, cool. Let me know. Yeah, David, if you try cooking this, let me know. Yeah, let me know how it goes. All right. Do it. Ooh, 16 seconds. Okay. Thank you everyone on Reddit. Thank you everyone for tuning in. We're pretty much done, so I'm not going to restart. But thank you for tuning in. Hop over to YouTube if you want to finish up. So I'll see you soon. All right. So that is our fried rice. I'm going to finish this with a couple of things. The last couple of things that I'm going to add to finish this off. The main thing that we're adding are the greens of our green onions. We had talked about this a little bit earlier. Is finished with these green onions. We deliberately set these aside to make sure that we didn't overcook them in our wok heat. And the last thing that I'm going to be using is a bit of furikake. So if you don't have furikake is a combination of a couple of things. Comes from Japanese cooking, and it is a combination of the main things that stand out to me is nori, which is dried seaweed, and then sesame seed. So if you can't find furikake, you could also just use sesame seed. I think in the original recipe I just used sesame seed, but I love using nori because it has a little bit more oomph to it, I guess. Furikake is super useful to add to things like fried rice, and just anything, especially like anything that is rice-based that needs just like a little bit more punch. It's a really great thing to do. A lot of times, what I just use if I'm like feeling really lazy is I'll just eat leftover rice with furikake, and that's like a really good, quick meal to throw together. A 2-quart jar of homemade kimchi. Oh, that's going to be really good. Do my neighbors know about this show? All of my neighbors are like old Chinese people, so they probably are really good at cooking this stuff too. So, but no, I don't think that they know. Yeah, a lot of the things that I'm cooking are probably things that my neighbors know how to cook too, because it just so happens I live in Chinatown, so they all are pretty familiar with these dishes. I really ran it. Yeah, it's 4 a.m. Oh, if it wasn't 4 a.m., definitely make it tomorrow. That's probably the real key to fried rice that lots of folks don't realize, especially when they're ordering it in restaurants, is that fried rice is really just made from leftover rice. It's the only way to make fried rice, actually, is that it has to be made from leftovers. So you can't make fried rice with fresh rice. So the only way that you can make it is with leftovers. So when you order it in a restaurant, what you're eating is just the leftovers from the day before. So that's the reason that fried rice exists, is because they had to do something with those leftovers, really. So next time that you eat fried rice in a restaurant, you know what you're eating is probably the rice from last night. So, but definitely, yeah, if you are going to cook this, I would recommend, if you are going to cook this and you don't have leftover rice, put a pot of rice on either the day before or even in the morning of, cook some rice, and then just open the lid up and let that rice dry out. So give it at least, you need to give that at least 7-8 hours in order to dry out. And if you really don't have enough time to dry that out, I would say spread it out on a sheet pan, and then you could even leave it outside, and that will probably speed the process up. But that rice, it does absolutely need to be dried out. You can't make fried rice with fresh rice, which I have tried a number of times because I forgot to have leftover rice, and it really doesn't work. So if you've followed these streams before, you'll notice that pretty much any time that I cook a fried rice, it's immediately following a day where I cooked something else that had rice in it. So yesterday we did honey sesame chicken, which we had fresh rice. It was honey sesame chicken over fresh rice, and the rice that we're using is the leftover rice from yesterday. So that's the only way that you can make fried rice. Yeah, you could also do it in the fridge. That's what some folks do, is so put it in an open container, so put it in a bowl and then toss it in the fridge. That will dry it out quicker too. What I like to do is just leave it out, leave it out into open air, and that for me has worked out. But it happens to be pretty cold here right now. So if it wasn't so cold, I would say I would probably have thrown it in the refrigerator. You're gonna make some rice? Oh, cool, yeah, so you have leftover rice, totally. What I've gotten the habit of doing is, so when I do have leftover rice, because I happen to have a rice cooker, so I have a zordorishi, which keeps leftover rice really, really fresh, which is really useful if you need fresh rice for 2 days, but really problematic because if you need to make fried rice, because it doesn't actually dry out in the way that a cheap rice cooker dries the rice out. So what I've gotten in the habit of doing is when I make rice, I'll probably keep a little bit in the rice cooker to eat later as just fresh rice, and then take the rest out and set it aside for fried rice, for sure. So if you're going to make fried rice, or rice specifically for fried rice, make sure that you don't want to eat it. Yeah, you see, yeah, without the fridge, you could do it without the fridge too, or what I usually do is just leave it out in the open air, which is a little bit concerning if you have rats or roaches or something just leaving food out in an open container. So if you're worried about that, you could totally toss it in the refrigerator for sure. I've also heard some people say that they throw it in the freezer, which I've never actually done. I don't know what will happen if that happens. I would imagine you would probably the moisture would freeze. And then I don't know what would happen when you throw that in the wok. But anyway, thank you everyone for tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. Super excited to see so many people coming back all the time. I know I recognize a bunch of people. I definitely have seen David here before. I've seen a couple folks here before. Whoa, dude. Kevin, I've seen popping up before. Tal, I'm really glad that you're going to get a cast iron pan and take a shot at this. Super stoked for everyone checking out this channel. Be sure to share the channel and help us hit that goal. We're working our way to 1,500. I don't know what we're at today or right now because the ticker doesn't update anymore. But help us hit that 1,500 subscriber goal by the end of the month. I'm super stoked to see so many people coming back for the channel. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop your questions in the comments. I don't know everything about fried rice, but I know lots of stuff. So hopefully I can be helpful or informative. I'm going to be here cleaning up. I'm going to shut the mic packs off, so if you have any questions, they'll drop them in the comments, and I should be able to respond still. So, all right. I'll see y'all soon. Stick around, or tune in tomorrow. I won't be live streaming, but I will have the new recipe video up. So tune in for mushu pork, and that's going to be super exciting. It's going to be done two different ways. So the first one is a hack for really basic mushu pork that's done like kind of American style, which is the P.F. Chang's hack. And the second is a more authentic mushu pork, but technically it's not mushu pork. It's a dish called hecai daimo, which is how my mom used to make it, which is basically mushu pork with vermicelli in it. It kind of reminds me of a Filipino pancit a lot. And it's that one I think is like follows a little bit more of a traditional trajectory for Chinese food. So that's coming up tomorrow. So stick around, tune in, make sure you're subscribed, and check that out. Right, I'll see you soon.
frustrated, just like you. Too goddamn young and innocent to change your mind. I found it going on and on. I found it going on and on. I can't believe you're burning up. I can't believe you're burning up now. I found it going on and on. I found it going on and on. I can't believe you're burning up. Come on, come on, burn it up, baby. It's easy to say human nature. Come on, burn it up, baby. It is dangerous. Burn it up, baby. It's easy to say human nature. Burn it up, baby. Yes, baby. It is dangerous. Oh, everybody's lonely, just like me. Everyone goes home at night alone to some degree. Every time you get baby, gonna need some help now. Stop to be dangerous. Trust no one but yourself, baby. Well, I'm all night going on and on. I'm all night going on and on. I can't believe you're burning up. I can't believe you're burning up. Now, well, I'm all night going on and on. Now, well, I'm all night going on and on. I can't